Well, hello there and welcome to our next video on this topic of the human digestive system. Now, in our last video, we talked about the parts of the digestive system. And we saw that the digestive system can be divided into two groups of organs. Right? We have the alimentary canal or the gut, right, which is the parts of the digestive system that the food passes through. Right, so everything that the food passes through, out. And then we have the associated organs, right, or the organs which produce fluids, but the food does not pass through them. So we had the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas, the salivary glands. Now, in this video, right, we're going to be talking about what happens to food as it passes through the alimentary canal. Now, before that, let's recap about the two types of digestion that we have already learned about. So, do you remember what the two types of digestion are? They are the physical digestion and chemical digestion. Now, this example here, is this physical or chemical digestion? What you see is a big piece of fat being broken down into smaller fat droplets. Now, this example here is physical digestion, right? Because it is just fat being broken down into smaller pieces of fat. There is no change in substance, right? Fat and fat. And there are no enzymes involved. Now, in the second case here, we see another kind of digestion where there are fat molecules being broken down into fatty acids and glycerol. And in addition, there's lipase acting on the fat molecules for this to happen. Now, this, if you recall, is chemical digestion. Firstly, because there are enzymes involved, in this case lipase, and secondly, because there's a change in substance. Right? From fat, we are producing fatty acids and glycerol molecules. Okay, so please recap this because it will be very important as we talk about how food moves through the alimentary canal. So in this video, we're going to be covering the structure and function of the mouth and the esophagus. We'll also be talking about the stomach. And finally, if we have time, we'll talk about the small intestine and the three different fluids that you can find in the small intestine. Are you ready to go? Alright, let's go! And before we move on, I'm sure you realize that I've put these words in bold: structure and function. Now that's because this is an important theme in biology which you will see come up again and again, that there is a relationship between the structure and the function of different organs and of different things. So for example, I'm sure you remember this about the picnic pants. Right, these pants look very funky. They're not to keep your feet dry. No, they're to eat stuff from. I don't know why people do this, but it might be quite cool to have picnic pants. There is a relationship between the structure of something and its function. Right, this picnic pants is a certain structure and it helps its function. So the structure of a tool is related to its function, right, like the picnic pants. Now in the same way, an organ structure is always related to its function. So if I put it in the form of a diagram, it will look something like this. This is an organ. It has a certain structure. So what does it contain? What does this organ look like? What does it have? That's its structure. It also does something. What does it do? That's its function. And you will always realize that there is a relationship between them. The structure of an organ is related to its function. And that's what we're going to be looking at as we look at the mouth and the stomach and the rest of the digestive system. So pay attention to these two words, structure and function. Now I want to start us off with the mouth. Now look at your friend next to you and open your mouth wide. Ah! Now, what do you see? What does your mouth contain? What structures do you find inside your mouth? Well, very clearly you see your teeth and your tongue, right? Of course, there might be other things like this uvula, which, it's not something else, right? But you see your teeth and your tongue. Now, what does it do? What do the teeth do? Why do you have teeth? So you can have a nice smile, take selfies. Well, not only that, right? Teeth have the function of cutting and grinding your food into smaller pieces. Cutting and grinding, right? The front teeth cut, and the back teeth, the molars, grind your food into smaller pieces. Now, is this physical or chemical digestion? And why do we grind the food up into smaller pieces? What's the point? Now, take note, this is about making it into bigger pieces, into smaller pieces. So it is a form of physical digestion. Right, the main reason for physical digestion is to increase the surface area for enzymes to act on. Right, this is what I talked about in the last week when we saw the pizza. Remember the pizza being broken up into many pieces. So physical digestion increases surface area for enzymes to act on. Now about your tongue, what does your tongue do? Well, it rolls food into small balls, and that helps you actually to swallow the food better later on. Now, can you see that we have structures like the teeth and the tongue and functions, and there's a relationship between them. The teeth are shaped in a certain way so that they can help to cut and grind food into smaller pieces. Now, besides your teeth and your tongue, the mouth contains one more structure, or a few actually. Here you see several glands. They have very, very, very long names, which are not very important. But they all have one common function. And if you group them together, we can call them the salivary glands. Now, what do the salivary glands do? See these glands which are near your mouth? They are associated organs. Okay, they're not part of the alimentary canal. But what do they do? Well, you tell me they produce saliva, right? Look at your sloppy saliva. Now, what does saliva do? What does it contain? Well, firstly, saliva wets your food. And secondly, saliva contains an enzyme called salivary amylase. And this enzyme, salivary amylase, breaks down some sort of food into something else. Can you remember what it is? Well, salivary amylase breaks down starch to maltose. So in a diagram form, remember that starch, which is made out of many units of glucose, can be broken down into maltose, which is made out of 2 units of glucose. Now, is this chemical or physical digestion? Well, the answer is it is chemical digestion, right? Because it involves an enzyme, salivary amylase, and there's a change in the substance from starch becoming maltose. So, to sum up, in the mouth, right, we have physical digestion due to chewing, right? And teeth cutting and grinding. And we also have chemical digestion. But we only have the chemical digestion of starch, which is a carbohydrate. Alright, so in the mouth, the chemical digestion of starch and carbohydrates begins. This leads to a slightly interesting question. Have you ever thought about why is baby food soft and mushy? Not sure how many of you have actually tried baby food before. It actually comes in very strange flavors, like teriyaki chicken and vegetables and rice, all crushed up. Now, why is baby food soft and mushy? You guys think about it, and you can tell me again when I'm back in class, alright? A hint is, think about what babies do not have. Alright? Now let's move on to the esophagus. Now the esophagus, of course, connects the mouth to the stomach. So what does it contain? Well, it really is just a long muscular tube. And its function to transport food from the mouth to the stomach, which is very simple. And the question is, what causes the food to move down the esophagus? What causes it to move down the esophagus from the mouth to the stomach? Well, a possible answer that you might have is gravity, right? I mean, it just drops like the food goes into the esophagus and then gravity pulls it down, right? Like an apple falling from the tree. Maybe that's kind of half correct. But have you ever considered, look at this giraffe here, for example. He's drinking water and the water needs to be moved from the mouth to the stomach. Do you notice any problems yet? Right, the water's being moved upwards against gravity. Ah. And how about the astronauts? They eat and drink in space. They eat and drink in space, space food, right? And they're able to swallow and the food's able to move into their stomach, even though there's no gravity in space. How does that happen? Surely there's something else besides gravity that moves food down from the mouth to the stomach. And indeed there is. And that something is what we've already heard about in the last video, peristalsis. So it is peristalsis, which is the rhythmic contraction and relaxation of muscles, you remember. That is what moves food down from the mouth to the stomach. And when I come back, I hope that I'll be able to show you this demonstration of it, alright? So remind me if I forget. Now what you see here is a diagram of peristalsis. And it shows you that above the food, right, there is an area of contraction. Right, the muscles above the ball of food contract, and at the point where the food is, the muscles need to relax below the ball of food so that the food can actually move into this area. Right, so that's peristalsis for you. That's how food is moved down the esophagus, right? Not just by gravity. Now let's end off with some simple questions. So firstly, does digestion occur in the esophagus after our food is just moving down from the mouth to the stomach? Now some of you guys would say, no, right? The esophagus doesn't produce any enzymes, so there's no chemical digestion. There's nothing really happening, it's just moving. But actually, if you think about it, there might be some digestion. Because the salivary amylase from the mouth still acts on the starch in the food. As the food is moving down from the mouth to the stomach, salivary amylase is still acting on the food. Alright, so it's yes and no, but actually most of the time I would say that if it comes out in the exams, most of the time we take it that the esophagus does not have any digestion in it, because it doesn't produce any enzymes of its own. Alright, but do think a bit further about it, and actually not all the answers are that simple. Okay, I'm going to stop here. And in the next video, we'll be carrying on with the stomach, and then we're done for this lesson.